A lot of people ask me to talk more about the time when we ruled Europe. And actually, some people don't know about the Moors, don't even believe that there's a time when we ruled Europe. So from the comments and the DMs, I'm compelled to do a video about the Moors. But before I get into the video, I want to say that it should not be surprising to you if you're watching this video and you're African, even if you're not African, that you have not been taught this history. Because I'm sure by now you know that knowledge is power. And this is something that the white Europeans who eventually colonized Africa understood very well when they sat at the University of Göttingen, Germany, around 1884, and unanimously decided to bury Africa at the bottom of the world heap, there never to ever rise again. And in order to achieve this, they knew that knowledge, or lack thereof, was the strongest weapon that they had. So after 1492, when the Europeans took control of Europe, they destroyed all the information about Africa that was stored in the libraries in Europe. All the libraries were set on fire and the treatises were burnt, losing a lot of the information was written in Europe. Then they came to Egypt and destroyed the Library of Alexandria, burnt most of the scrolls, but fortunately for us, some of the information was written on walls, which they could not destroy, or at least they tried, but they didn't succeed. Now, after destroying the physical information, they now used slavery to create an information gap by leaving the oldest and the youngest and taking the strongest part of society into slavery or killing them. And when they took them into slavery, they separated them so that they would not share information about how great Africa was. Now, the final nail in the coffin was the indoctrinated Africans by creating a curriculum for them. So now, for the most part, majority of Africa are studying curriculums that were designed by white supremacists. So they'll let you study about Arab slave trade in Africa, but they'll not let you study about the Moors, yet those two happened around the same time. They'll let you study about how Europe colonized Africa, but they'll never let you know that Africa colonized Europe first. And believe it or not, Europeans worked as slaves in Africa. And the perfect example I'll give you is you will always see images like this, but you'll never see images like this. Anyway, the strongest weapon that we have as Africans is the internet and the ability to share this information with just a click of a button. So to understand the history of Africa in Europe, let's look at some of the ancient maps, and you'll see them here. One of the most ancient maps is the Ptolemy's map, and there are a few others as well that came much later. But the consistency in them is that present-day East and Central Africa was or Ethiopia interior. Why is this important? When the ancients talked about an Ethiopian man, now you know where they came from based on the map that we've just seen. African rulership in Europe does not exactly start in 711, but it goes all the way back to the 25th dynasty of Egypt and a young Ethiopian general called Takaha and his uncle Shabataka. So now the Waganda watching this know where Shabataka comes from. Because most of East Africa was called Ethiopia Interior or Upper Ethiopia, the Greeks and Romans sometimes used the term Ethiop to describe Africans. And this meant burnt face or sun-kissed, a feature which distinguished Africans from the rest. Another term that was used by the Greeks or Romans to describe anyone that was black is Moor or Moros, which literally translates to dark. Now finally, the words Berber or Saracen were also invariably used to describe non-Arabian people from Northwest Africa. Berber was mostly used by the Arabs, and the early Christians in Europe used the term Saracen to describe black people. Professor Lotfi of the University of Morocco is the one who did the research that eventually proved that Berber and Moor actually meant the same thing. So in summary, if you are reading African history in Europe, forget all the other terms. Moor, Saracen, Berber, Northwest African, replace them with African, because we have looked at the ancient maps of Africa and seen where the Africans came from to go and rule Europe. Now, before we go into part 2, if you're interested in reading more about this, get a book called The Golden Age of the Moors by Ivan van Sertima, or The Moors in Spain by Stanley Lenpool. Although I tried to stay away from this one because Stanley Lenpool was a white man and was often found trying not to commit to the color of the Moors. Now that we've seen where the Africans came from and who they were, let's look at how we enter Portugal and Spain. Arabs started to invade Africa in 647 AD, but African resistance was eventually broken when one of the strongest and most revered female generals in Africa battle history, Dahia al-Kahina, was killed in 708 AD. This marked the start of the Arabization and Islamization of North Africa. So as the Arabs conquered territories in North Africa, they often co-opted African generals and soldiers who had distinguished themselves in battle, which therefore meant that most of the Arab armies had African soldiers. Now, the thing with the Arabs is that they were happy to let Africans in territories that they had conquered to govern themselves as long as they paid tribute and converted to Islam. But remember, we said that African soldiers were skilled and distinguished in battle. So the Arab emperors trusted them and would therefore persuade them to attack and conquer any territories that the Arabs were interested in. Now, this is where the idea of conquering the Iberian Peninsula, Spain and Portugal, comes from the Arabs. So in 711, the armies attack and conquer Spain and Portugal, and even try to advance further into France. But we faced some challenges in France. The Christian armies of the Vandals and the Visigoths were able to resist the African armies for some time. And so we decided, okay, France was cold, the weather was not good, we decided to go back to Spain. And we start to build and civilize the Iberian Peninsula, governing them from the city of Toledo. So we paved the streets, built 200,000 beautiful homes, and add to that 10,000 palaces. Then Europeans start to flock from all over Europe to come and stay in the Iberian Peninsula. And we didn't let them live in slums like they've done in Kailicha, South Africa, or in Kibera, Nairobi, or Makoko in Lagos, while they live in beautiful, luxurious homes at the coasts. No, we welcomed them and civilized them. Look at these beautiful homes and palaces. This is where the Europeans stayed, even the poorest of the poor. And when we realized that they didn't like bathing, time when it was a grievous thing to bathe, we said, no, bathing brings you closer to God. It makes you more holy. We built 900 public baths. 900 beautiful public baths. Look at us teaching the Europeans how to bathe. Oh, how great we were, how beautiful the Moors were back then. And at a time when the Europeans used to drink their urine and smell the shoes of the most traveled person to heal disease, we introduced medicine. We taught and certified doctors and introduced the beautiful art of holistic healing. I'm talking about the black people who understood the art of medicine, not the black people of today forcing their kids to get vaccinated. I'm talking about a time when the standard of beauty was the African man, the elegance of the African man, the beauty and grandeur of the African woman. I'm talking about a time when Moors ruled the world. I'm talking about a time when someone thought of intelligence, they thought of a black man and a black woman. I'm telling you today about a time when Africans understood the business of civilizing societies. And at a time when 90% of Europe was uneducated, we built 800 public schools and encouraged all of Europe to come and study. And at this time, some of the kings in Europe didn't even know how to read and write because the rest of Europe had only one university. We built universities and big libraries where we stored all our work. And all our research and work was written in ink so that everyone could read, and written on what is now called treatise, and stored in the big libraries that we built. Imagine, one black man set up a library of 600,000 books, and he was called Caliph Al-Hakma. And when we dressed so nice and elegant, accentuated the clothes with lapis lazuli, gold, silver, malachite, bronze, hematite, pearlite. The clothes were made of silk and brocade. Look at the Africans who civilized and developed Europe. Look at the grace, look at the poise, look at the beauty, look at the glory, look at the power, look at the elegance. I'm talking about African people who knew the business of dressing up. They didn't go to Kariako in Dar es Salaam to get second-hand clothes from Europe and China. They didn't go to Kawangware in Nairobi or Owino in Kampala. No, they made their own clothes and made them so well, so wonderfully. The African people who understood that fine feathers make fine birds and dressed accordingly. And when the Africans did anything in Europe, they did it well to the best of their abilities, always putting their best foot forward. When they taught Europe about astronomy, they wrote it on treatises, built globes and taught Europe that the earth was not flat, taught them about the eclipse. You can see the treatise here. When they made swords, they made them with precision. Look at the craftsmanship and artistry, the engineering skills that the African blacksmiths and sculptors worked with. Look at the brass plates, look at the spears. I'm talking about a time when Africans introduced games like chess to a society of Europeans that were used to fighting. Oh, the Moors introduced the art of time telling. And when they made clocks, they made them so beautifully and wonderfully, using some of the finest minerals, gold, bronze, silver. These Africans were not servants, they were kings and queens, teachers, leaders, rulers, lecturers, doctors, all interested in the development of Europe and the rest of the world. How beautiful a story this is, the time when we ruled Europe and Spain. I'm talking about a time when Europeans were born, lived, and died under the rulership of black people. And they enjoyed it and never expected to see anything else. A time when they thought that the African rulership of them would never end. I'm talking about a time when Africans governed Europeans and governed them well. I'm talking about a time when if they picked a woman, an African woman, they picked the blackest of the black. Not the African woman of today who's not proud of her black skin, who is bleaching to look like Kim Kardashian and all the other white people. I'm talking about Africans who were black and made midnight jealous. I'm talking about African people who are blacker than the South Sudanese, the Senegalese of today. I'm talking about a time when if anyone saw you with white skin, they would wonder what's wrong with you. A time when black skin was something to be proud of. I'm talking about the African people who civilized Europe. The African people. And when we ruled the Europeans, we didn't use religion to divide them. We built a mosque and church in one wonderful architectural marvel of a structure. And when it came to agriculture, we wrote so many treatises on agriculture, and you can see them here. One man called Sheikh Aixa Sekandi wrote the most treatises about agriculture. And we taught Europe about irrigation, built big aqueduct pipes to transport thousands of gallons of water over hundreds of miles to irrigate crops and plants that we had introduced to Europe. Analyzed the semi-arid land so that they could grow plants like grapes, olives, oranges, bananas, rice, sugar, cotton, to mention but a few. And at the peak of all these agricultural inventions, we introduced this water wheel, which was an invaluable source of energy for irrigation and grinding grain. And when you talk about music, we taught Europe everything they know about music, art and drama. And the biggest influence at the time was a black man called Ziriab, or Blackbird, a name given to him because of his black complexion, his eloquence, and melodious sweetness of his voice. Along with the wealth of artistic knowledge that Ziriab came with, we taught Europeans percussion, how to use musical instruments like flutes, all sorts of wind instruments. And in the city of Cordova, Ziriab founded the first conservatory of music. And Ziriab eventually became a fashionable arbiter of taste in Europe. This man was class. He wore perfumes, deodorants, changed hairstyles, and every European copied him. I'm talking about an African fashion icon who impacted society greatly. Ziriab, the Blackbird. Oh, what a great man he was. And we introduced the fiesta in Spain, and every day between 2 and 4 p.m. people would rest and drink and eat. I'm talking about the African Moors who changed society for the better. Look at the tapestry and embroidery on the buildings that they built in Spain and Portugal. Look at them gracefully standing on emblems of beautiful different cities in Europe. I'm talking about African people who knew the business of trade, agriculture, justice, governorship, the African people who governed vast territories and governed them well. The never-ending story of the Moors.